Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Today we're going to be discussing the Kakhovka Dam destruction disaster. And I want to start with something that I believe needs to be etched in stone. That everything that is happening right now in Ukraine, all of the deaths, destruction, suffering, and what will be happening lies solely on one party that committed the cardinal and fundamental crime, the crime of aggression. And that party is obviously Russia, because it's them that started this aggressive warfare. We agree on that? Good. Then let's begin. So on the 6th of June, during the night, something happened with the Kakhovka Dam that is holding the Kakhovka Lake, which is a water reservoir that is used for a lot of things, to provide water for people, to also provide water to Crimea, to also provide cooling to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and many other things. So in the morning when I woke up, I saw videos and exploded social networks that the evacuation process is ongoing, and I saw pictures and videos of areas down the stream being flooded and people running for their lives, and basically all the signs of the ecological disaster on happening before my eyes. From there, versions about what really happened started to emerge, where people have begun speculating what really happened. The main version is that Russia has blown up the dam, and which led to the flooding of a lot of Ukrainian cities. And the reasons for that are quite obvious. It's because of the fearing counteroffensive from the Ukrainian side. So Russians just wanted to prevent Ukrainians from crossing Dnipro River, and also allow them to kind of get some of the forces away from the Kherson Oblast and put more towards the direction where Ukrainians are right now attacking. While this stays the main version promoted by the Ukrainian officials, there are a couple of things that just didn't fully align with me. Firstly, the lack of evidence for that. While I agree that it's clearly could happen, because it was Russia that was on control of the dam, it was Russia that we know back in the last year has actually mined this whole dam full of explosives, so it had the ability to do so. Some people claim that it potentially was Ukraine, like I think Russians claim that it was Ukraine trying to strike dam with some of the MLRS systems, or some news sources from Russia actually said that they saw the activity of Ukrainian snipers with large caliber machine guns. The truth is, a dam is a big thing. It's a big object, and it's a very, very sturdy object. And it's the Soviet dam. That thing can hold, literally from the outside, that thing can hold almost like a nuclear explosion. And while it was damaged by the Russian forces after they retreated from the north part of the Kherson Oblast, the damage was mostly located around the top part where the bridge was. So the idea was for Russians to blow up the bridge rather than blow up the dam. So the damage was there, but the significance of that damage was still unclear. But dam stood, and it stood quite well. It stood through the whole winter, so it was fine. However, for during the information discovery phase, one specific picture has caught my eye, and it was the picture from like the bird's eye view, I think it was from satellite, of Kakhovka Dam being almost completely consumed by the waters. And at first I didn't pay that much attention, but then I kind of looked closely. And what I noticed was that water was overflowing not just the dam itself, which could be the case, because like if there was an explosion underwater, then part of the dam kind of, went a little bit down, so the water was overflowing. But more importantly, water was overflowing also natural objects, like that small island on the picture. So for me, it was a big kind of a question mark. Why is that? Why is there water that's supposed to be kind of lower than the whole area around here was suddenly so high? After finding out some more information, it turned out that Russians over the last month or so have been actually steadily gathering the water inside of the reservoir. So they were preparing essentially a big pool of water that wasn't there in the last 5 or 6 years. At least that's how far the data goes. Potentially, it was never there before. And then it hit me, because what I'm trying to analyze is Russians, and why would Russians do something? And we all already know the pattern of Russians and how their actions are taking place and how their mistakes are made. That's the most important part. So the so-called the profile of a killer, what we were looking for is something that would be sounding kind of, smart, incredible on paper, but in practice, it can cause to a complete disaster due to some ignorance, unprofessionalism, or hubris. That was kind of the pattern that pretty much most of the biggest and worst errors that Russia has committed during this war, and that is when it kind of also started making sense. The puzzle pieces started clicking together. Russians have started flowing that reservoir after, I believe it was around that time, when Ukrainians posted some of their new brigades training on water crossings, training on how to cross different water barriers. Or maybe a coincidence, but knowing Russians, I would not be surprised that this was their information source. So they started gathering the water around that time. What can that mean? For me, it made it clear. Maybe, just maybe, and this is obviously my speculation, what they thought that dam can be their backup plan. So in case of Ukraine tries to cross the river Dnipro at some point, then they can always open the reservoirs that contain a lot of water, and they will be able to prevent any kind of naval offensive that Ukraine would try to execute. And that already started making some sense for me. However, because of their incompetence and stupidity, they flooded a lot more water for the dam that, remember, during last year was already somewhat damaged. So potentially, I'm not saying, because the explosion is still not ruled out completely, but potentially what could have happened, and it would align quite well, is that Russians have really prepared this backup plan, but they flooded way too much water that was supposed to be in the water reservoir. And then, because of their plan completely backfiring, the water just started flowing through, because the damage on the Kakhovka Dam was just not properly repaired during that time. More importantly, some people have found out that on the 30th of May, Russians actually released an order prohibiting them from investigating any damages on critical infrastructure due to the military activity. And it says in that document that it's not only prohibition of investigation, but also repairs on that critical infrastructure. A very interesting document, one might say. But this is, again, speculation on my part. But it just makes perfect sense, because while there are people still trying to investigate if the explosions were planned and so on, and there's a lot of people working about it on Ukrainian side, for me, so far in this war, a video evidence is almost kind of like a must. And especially when we're talking like something like blowing up a dam, then I would expect, especially I'm expecting that Ukrainians have been monitoring it 24/7. I'm pretty sure there was a drone somewhere flying around there. In any case, I would expect that there would be some kind of concrete evidence, or at least reports, or people hearing explosions, or anything like that. But no, we just kind of hear that and see that what is happening is that just the water started flowing. And in my perspective, the sheer incompetence of Russians and complete miscalculation of their plans just makes so much more sense. Most important thing to underscore here, that this does not mean that Russians are innocent in the situation, it was an honest accident. That is not it. Firstly, because of the war of aggression. Secondly, it was the Russians that were in control of this dam, and it was Russians that actually damaged it and then didn't repair it, or more importantly, didn't get any kind of commissions into the dam to make sure that it's repaired and so on. Because Russia is completely awful state. Normally, if the conventional warfare would be happening, the goal of the warfare is to destroy your enemy's army, right? Russia says that they also want to capture territory. Okay, fine. But when it comes to the critical objectives, a normal Geneva Convention, or like whatever, any convention, like warfare, would at least understand that objects like a dam that can cause huge damage and killings of civilians is very dangerous, that a nuclear power plant is dangerous, that probably around these areas demilitarized zones should be created. If you are an aggressor, you are saying that, okay, I'm an aggressor, yes, but we're a strong country and we can surely defeat Ukraine. You would not reserve yourself to use these kind of objectives in a military needs, especially because they're prohibited by the conventions. Yet for Russia, that was not the case. Russians specifically used these as a military targets. They saw a nuclear power plant not a dangerous place that should be demilitarized because the catastrophe would be great indeed, but as a place where they can just store their ammunition, or a place where they can put their artillery systems and Ukraine will not fire back because they will be firing back at the nuclear power plant. So they were quite okay just committing war crimes and so on. So important thing, what Russia did, the fact that Russia did not have experts assessing the damage on the dam after the explosion, the fact that Russia did not demilitarize the area or close the area or anything else, it was the Russians that controlled this, and they had some kind of plan on how to utilize their dam and flood the area and have the genocidal idea of flooding Ukrainian troops. It's essentially using a weapons of mass destruction. It is still completely unacceptable, and it is still an awful war crime, even in that scenario, if the dam was broken by itself, so to speak. And to round it all off, I want to address some of the smooth-brained, peanut-minded analysts, if I can even say that kind of word, that say that, oh, Russia wouldn't do it because Russia, there was like some Russian defense positions that got flooded, and some of the Russian first line defense force were also trapped on the trees or on the islands. The person, if it's a Westerner that is reporting it, it's not like a Russian propagandist or something. It's just, if it's an honest Westerner, then he's an idiot. He's a person that refuses to learn despite overwhelming evidence and data showing him. Russia does not care about Ukrainian lives. It does not care. Russia do not care about Russian lives. Russia does not care about the lives of their forces. Russia does not care the lives of their prisoners. Russia does not care. Human life in Putin's Russia is worth nothing. It's just dust. It's just numbers on a balance sheet. It completely is irrelevant. Everything is supposedly to a bigger goal. So having a plan where some of your troops would just get swept away by the flood would not be even remotely clear even remotely relevant for the Russians. And then someone would say, it's like, oh, Georgie, but what about the civilians in Crimea? Russia cares about civilians in Crimea. And that is like, the people still not thinking. Like, have you seen pictures of Russian cities? Do they look like the government's care? Do they look like Putin is really interested in improving life of Russians? No. Get it down to your head. Russians absolutely don't care whether the lives of their military, whether the lives of civilians get destroyed. It's not relevant for them. They don't even care about the territory. The country that wants to invade other country to occupy it does not mine every square inch of that country by remote mining. It does not grind to dust cities that supposedly it then takes to just, instead of building cities on empty fields in your own huge country, instead supposedly go into the other country, capture that city or what's left of the city, pile of rubble, and then have a more expensive bill just to rebuild it. It's not the country that says we are here to protect Russian speakers in the East and then proceeds to kill in hundreds of thousands the Russian speakers in the East. That is not the country that will care that some of the water supplies will go down for some of the. And let's be honest, who are the people that are living right now in Crimea? It's civilian occupying forces, because this is the pattern of what the Soviet Unions did. It's the pattern of what Russia is doing. They're occupying the land that belongs to other nations, and then they start sending in the Russians from the other areas. They start in making sure the demographics in the area changes irreversibly, that there is never a chance for anything. That is how a lot of Russians ended up in the Baltics. That is how a lot of Russians ended up in Ukraine and other places. To wrap it up, let's talk about the consequences of all of this. And the first and most important consequence that people are asking is about the nuclear power plant. So the nuclear power plant has its own water reservoir that was feeding in from the water from the river, and it is full right now. It is full. The full reservoir is able to sustain power plant to work for about 2 to 3 days. However, the nuclear power plant is actually turned off, and it has been turned off for a while now. A turned off power plant requires about 1,000 times less cooling. For precise numbers, ask a nuclear scientist. But the point is that the problem of cooling of nuclear power plants is to keep the engines running. And engines are being run by diesel generators right now on that power plant. So the water is sufficient to last for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure by that time Ukrainians will be able to liberate the nuclear power plant and then restore it to a normal operations. So there is no nuclear hazard that is right now. With regards to flooding, on the Ukrainian part of the river delta, there has been reports of major floodings. The damage to the economy is significant. And in short term, it's going to be hard to restore any kind of normal lives for about 40,000 of people. So it's really bad. It's really bad. There obviously people died in that. They're mostly immobile, older people that were, mostly living their stationary life in the smaller houses that people just didn't know about. With regards to what is happening on the Russian side, there were some waves of evacuations last years from the area, so it's not as densely populated as before, but overall there is very little that Ukraine can do. So it was fully on this on the consciousness of the Russians to flood this area and kill Ukrainians as they wished. We don't know yet. Long-term damage, this is going to be quite problematic. Repairs I've seen would estimate to repair this nuclear power to this hydropower plant in about 5 years. But obviously the dam, I believe, can be built a little bit faster. But all in all, I think that generally speaking, now we just need to live with what is happening. The water will go down a little bit once the reservoir is emptied, and in coming days we will see the level of water dropping a little bit on both sides. Mostly it's the Russian side that got flooded because they were on the lowlands. So all in all, huge damages. It is definitely a catastrophe. Like, you can find other people accounting and so on. It's going to be the number and bill for it is going to be enormous for Russia. And I'm hoping I will see the day when Russia will start paying for it. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Follow up my channel, follow up to what is happening in Ukraine. Support the Ukrainian military in the description of the video. Support this channel if you want. Join the Discord. Let's talk about this. I love you all. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.